into the program first here, Mark Sargent, who is has a background in professional computer playing, also in software development. And in 2014, he started looking into what he calls no doubt the most ridiculous conspiracy ever. And through extensive research has discovered that flat earth theory isn't so laughable after all. He's got a YouTube channel. We got that linked up at parabnormalradio.com. He's author of Flat Earth Clues. The sky's the limit, and the sky is the limit tonight on the program. Welcome, Mark Sargent.
Hey,
Actually,
how are you? Thanks for having me.
I've got to mute you here. Hi, Mark. Good evening.
Hi.
And we also have David Weiss joining me. He became a truth seeker in 2001 after 9/11, in fact. And it was at that point in time that he discovered the Earth is not a spinning ball flying through space. So good evening to you as well, David.
Good evening.
It's a pleasure to have both of you here. And so for those who don't know what we're talking about, I don't know if people have been living under a rock or not, but there are many people who don't understand the movement in which we are speaking about. And that movement is known as flat earth theory. Who wants to start? What's the definition of that?
I'll start.
Take it, Mark.
Yeah, this is Mark. The flat earth theory is, how shall I break this down, is the firm held belief that we, at the very least, are not spinning on a globe going through space at tens of thousands of miles an hour, and that we are living on a almost perfectly flat plane, sitting on top of a structure that we can't define, which may or may not be enclosed by some sort of either Truman Show type dome or firmament, if you believe in the biblical side of things. And that the United States and the Soviet Union figured this out back in 1956, and the powers that be have been keeping it from us ever since then and spending a heck of a lot of money, and that NASA was formed for the sole purpose of hiding it from us. And for whatever reason, this thing started taking off a couple of years ago, and you know, if you've been watching the news recently, it's trending faster than most mainstream topics. So that's my summary.
Your thoughts on that?
You know, I was doing a podcast for years, and I had fans of the show that were constantly messaging me, check out Flat Earth, and I would ignore them for 6 months. I even banned people from posting on our social media. And then one researcher convinced me to look, and I started looking, and I did come across Mark's Flat Earth Clues along with other stuff, and I went in for about 2 weeks trying to debunk it, and I came out the other side knowing that we don't live on a spinning ball. And since then, I now know that we live on a flat, stationary plane. And, you know, the people that belief is the enemy of knowing, that we live on a spinning ball really don't know anything about the ball. And, you know, if they do study it, they become flat earthers. But most of them just mock it and say it's crazy, but it's the flip side that's true.
Yeah, and let me throw in one more thing, which is nobody gets into this thinking it's a good idea. Everybody tears into it at first. It's the Neo jumping from building to building scenario. Everybody falls at first. Everybody thinks it's a piece of crap, but once you start looking into it, it becomes a Pandora's box. And the listeners out there, I mean, if you're taking calls, there's going to be people that are really upset, and they're not even going to know why they're upset.
So I just have one request of the listeners calling in. You may be calling in with something that you believe absolutely proves that we don't live on a spinning ball, or that it can't be flat, that we live on a spinning ball and that it can't be flat. Instead of coming in with that attitude, an unwillingness to look, pose it as a question and say, hey, I have this proof that I think proves that the Earth is not flat. Can you explain it to me? And then allow us to explain it.
Well, here's how I'm going to treat this conversation. I hope the listeners will as well, because I, as I've explained before, come to every subject, whether it be paranormal or whether it even be a topic like tonight, whether the Earth is flat. From an open aspect, I think everybody owes it whether or not they believe in it or not, at least be open to the possibilities that it could actually be true, because a lot of things that we know are challenged forever, and it takes a very long time before the definitive proof ever comes to what has been theorized for an awful long time. My guests, Mark Sargent and David Weiss, and we're talking with them. By the way, the website enclosedworld.com, marksargent.com, and the Facebook page is at Flat Earth Clues Book. Both of these gentlemen believe that the Earth is flat. And I know one of the theories that that you actually use to make your point. Is it the Truman theory, Mark?
The Truman Show theory, yeah. That if you could build a structure big enough, if the Truman Show was, say, the 1998 movie with Jim Carrey, if that structure, the Hollywood backlot set, was 20 miles or so wide, if you could build it thousands of miles wide, could you convince an entire civilization through several generations that they were living in something else? And it was not only very possible, but likely.
What is your basis for the flat Earth theory, David?
So the question is, are we in an enclosed dome, or do we live on an infinite plane, or a combination of both? My belief is that we do live on an infinite plane, and there is some sort of enclosure, whether it's physical, whether it's vibrational, or energetic. I'm not sure. We don't know. But if you ask me, if I had to pick something, I would say there is some sort of enclosure, or something that we completely don't understand. I believe that the infinite plane goes on way past the shoreline that surrounds us, that we call Antarctica, and there is more land that we don't know about.
It seems of late there has been more coverage of flat Earth, particularly from NBA basketball stars. In fact, Shaquille O'Neal, I'm not sure if he actually believes in flat Earth or not after what I heard on Jimmy Kimmel, but it sure looked like he was trying to pull one over on us for some time. Here's actually what he said on the program.
That was a joke about the world being flat, right?
Was it? Of course it was.
When I heard you say that, people were getting all excited. It's like, there's no way that he wasn't joking in this situation.
They got upset. And my theory is, I bought a bus a couple of summers ago.
Uh-huh.
So when I drive from Florida to California, it seems flat to me.
I see. Okay.
So you ever been in a flight and you get ready to land and you pull up the window and you look?
Yeah.
It seems flat, right?
Well.
So that was my theory. I'm just joking. Relax.
They almost took your PhD in education away.
Yeah, they did.
But there are other NBA basketball stars who
Uh-oh. I can't hear anything.
even a little bit contradictory.
Well, they play with a basketball on a flat basketball court. There's nothing wrong with that. They're running along a flat plane playing with balls.
So does that actually prove? Yeah.
It doesn't prove anything. I'm just saying, when people say, hey, all the other stars and planets are around, first, that's an assumption, because the only thing we know about stars and planets are what Disney and NASA has told us, and there's not much of a difference between the two. Think of a pool table. It's covered, you're shooting the balls on it, but the table's flat. There's combinations of all sorts of things.
And to Shaq's point, when he's driving cross country, it's very interesting, because there was a university study done a few years back where they determined that Kansas was actually as flat as a pancake. It was 99.999% flat, the entire state. And scientists will come back and say, well, no, that's just a really flat place, but it's still on a globe. And we can point out many other very, very, very flat places on this world that science, and how many do we have to have before, science realizes that this world is not what you think it is?
But does NBA basketball stars coming out and saying that the Earth is flat bring credence or credibility to your cause?
So let me chime in here.
Sure.
Did Kyrie Irving come out on his own and do it? There's some people say he was totally put up to it, or did he do it by himself? I kind of think he did it by himself. Was Shaq put up to it? Shaq does wear a Freemason ring. Jimmy Kimmel's studio is a Freemason temple. And who knows, maybe Shaq opened his mouth and he was forced to go on Kimmel and retract it, or maybe the whole thing was a setup. I don't know, but Mark always says, it doesn't matter whether it was set up or not. It's getting flat Earth out in the minds of the people.
Yeah, any publicity is good publicity. And Kyrie Irving, I mean, my God, the guy's, he's currently the world title holder for the NBA, star guard. And then his friend Richard Jefferson, nobody should let him off the hook because he was really the instigator behind this. Draymond Green and others, AJ Styles, a wrestler, all these guys came out before Shaq. And then Shaq came out. And by the way, it took Shaq 5 days to retract that. And by then, every media outlet had picked it up everywhere.
Yeah, I'm actually glad I caught that clip because that is a little bit misleading when you hear that somebody believes in something and then you don't hear that they actually don't. That's get dangerous.
So one thing, Shaq says he drives across the country and it seems flat. No flat earther that I know uses that as a proof. But that is out there in the mainstream. They're running with that because it's a ridiculous argument. Because if the Earth truly was a ball, which it's absolutely impossible that it could be, you might not notice the curve as you were driving. But as you look farther into this, just the thought of the Earth being a ball, spinning or not, is utterly ridiculous.
Yeah, and don't forget that after Kyrie came out, that rapper B.O.B. came back into the spotlight and was finally interviewed on Hot 97 FM. And he interviewed terribly, and he was bringing up examples that nobody in the community uses. So, in some ways it's good, but in other ways it's like, which is why I'm glad Jaron reached out to B.O.B. and said, "Look, if you need cheat sheets and crib notes on this, we're happy to provide them. Because there's better stuff out there better points."
We've got Joe, we've got John, we've got James in our Spreaker chat room tonight. My guests are David Weiss and Mark Sargent, and they are from enclosedworld.com talking about flat Earth clues. And we'll get into some of those clues when our conversation continues after the bottom of the hour news with That's 818-672-6865. You don't have to know as much as Mark Sargent or David Weiss. If you believe one way or another in your point of view, I want to hear from you tonight. Because, hey, even if the guys want to just lay out a few points in which they believe, and it's a belief, it's not actually it's a no. It's not even a belief or a thought. It is a no. These guys know the Earth to be flat, and I'm sure if you called in, they would give you a few little particulars, and they may change your mind, they may not, but at least we can have an honest conversation. So, you say that basically, David, that there pretty much is no doubt in your mind that the Earth is flat, and what did you call it? Utterly ridiculous or something to that?
It's complete nonsense to believe in the spinning ball. We've been, indoctrinated since birth. Sesame Street has all sorts of globe Earth programming. Then you go to kindergarten and they have the globe in the front of the classroom, and you're dazzled by NASA and Disney. It's when you look at it, it's an insidious mind programming, but with absolutely no proof. Just one thing I want to say about what we believe. I believe I drive a car. I know I step on the gas and it goes, it has wheels, it has a steering wheel. I know a lot about my car, but I don't know everything about it. But I have enough proof to tell you that it is a car, and I know it's a car. We don't know everything about the flat Earth. Mark is pretty firmly believe that we have a solid barrier that goes around us, hence his website, enclosedworld.com. I believe that there is some sort of barrier, but I don't know, and I believe the plane goes on infinitely. And Mark and I are in agreement that we don't know. We have our beliefs on where it ends and how far it goes, but I don't want anyone to think that there's only one answer. We don't know the answer, and we'll get into why we don't know and how we maybe one day can know.
Yeah.
Mark, do you care to respond to that?
Oh, sure. I agree with everything David said there. And I'll throw in these things as well. when it comes to just about everything else in your world, you can test it. Fire burns, water is wet, you drop something, it falls to the floor. That appears to be some sort of, force that's either pushing or pulling it down. These are things you can test right now. All of us can. But when it comes to the shape of the world, this is something that you are told. Nobody tests this on their own. And as a matter of fact, I'll go far as to say that if you asked 100 people on the street, how do you know you're on a globe right now? Eventually, and it's not going to take them long, they'll lean on NASA or one of the other space programs if you're from another country. And it's like, okay, that's what I expect you to say. You want to lean on NASA and say, oh, I've seen the pictures, I've seen the satellites. There's a streaming thing from ISS. I go, okay, fine. The first picture of the Earth from space in full sunlight was taken in 1972 by Apollo 17. We won't get into why Apollo 8 through Apollo 16 didn't take any pictures. The second picture wasn't even taken until 2 years ago, 2015. 43 years without a secondary picture of the Earth from space in full sunlight. And you're going, okay, what's your point? My point is, if the first picture was taken in 1972, how did you know before that it was a globe? And you say, well, science. Even if you go back all the way to the inception of NASA, which was only 12 years earlier in 1958, it's not like we woke up one day in the late 1950s, early 1960s and said, we live on a globe. Oh, we went up high enough to take the picture. How did you know before NASA was created, because they were the first ones, how did you know you lived on a globe? Because we supposedly have known like 100% for 400 and something years before that. And they'll come back and say, well, science told us. And I go, that's my point. Science is not infallible. Science is an institution like anything else, like politics, like corporations. If they figured out that it wasn't a globe after preaching it for 400 and something years, would they tell you? And if you're naive enough to say, oh, of course they tell us, they disclose it to us right away, then you probably shouldn't be listening to this station.
UFOs and everything else, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So do you think it will come a point in time in our civilization, my lifetime, your lifetime, maybe in your children or grandchildren's lifetimes, that the world will come to know, the majority of the world, that the globe is actually not a globe?
Oh, Mark, you want to hit that one first? Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I absolutely think so. In fact, I think there's a reason why it's been happening at such an accelerated rate over the last couple of years. I don't think we're going to have to wait very long, because at the rate this thing is spreading, we're going to get into potential class action lawsuits against NASA, for one, and some high-power people that are going to look into this. I think it's part of something bigger, but I'd want David to chime in as well.
You know what? I think that it's accelerating at an unbelievable pace. If you go on YouTube and search Flat Earth and then sort by upload date, we're pushing 17 million videos when just 2 years ago there was 5,000 or what?
Oh,
is that right, Mark?
Yeah, maybe 50,000.
Yeah. So they're literally cutting back. I believe that there's more than that. YouTube is censoring the numbers. I believe that it's such an important secret that if we do get to the point where it is ready to go mainstream, something else will happen to distract the world from it.
Yeah. It's part of something bigger. I've said this for a long time now, which is Flat Earth, I'll use a boxing reference, is the left jab before the right hook. There's something else to this, and this is being allowed to go into mainstream. The numbers David was quoting there was absolutely right. I mean, if you look up Donald Trump by upload date, it comes in a little over 17 million. If you sort NASA by upload date, it's under 7 million. And more than that, though, we get a lot of the people that get into Flat Earth. It's because it's recommended to them in YouTube, and it shows up. Go into any search engine, type in "the Earth is" and see what the first criteria search pops up. It's going to be flat. That you could shut that down or repress it in 2 seconds with some simple development, and it's not being done. In fact, the opposite is happening. It's being allowed to propagate into the system. So it's exciting, but at the same time, it's still a little scary because we don't know where it's going.
John in our chat room on Spreaker asks, if you start at the equator and travel directly east or west for 24,901 miles, you will find that you have returned to your departure point. Explanation, please.
I'd like to answer that one.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
So just real quick, the Flat Earth model Figure it as a circle on a flat plane. In the center of that circle is the magnetic north. Just imagine a big magnet in the center of that circle. So now halfway out of that circle to the edge is the equator, and it goes around that on a flat plane around that center point. If you put a compass on that equator line, it's going to point to the center, and as you move it around that circle, that compass is constantly going to point towards the center. So east is not due east and due west are not directions. It's magnetic east and magnetic west. You're going in circles. Plenty of planes and people and explorers have circumnavigated the flat Earth east to west. Nobody, except one guy that lied about it, has gone north to south, because north is to the center. As soon as you pass the center, you're going south, and south goes on until either you hit a wall or keep going forever. There is no edge to the flat Earth.
Yeah, and let me throw in one more thing here. What he's also saying is there's a magnetic north, but there is no magnetic south. In fact, some of the people I've talked to, including an Australian military intelligence guy, he said, look, because everyone kind of wonders, because we're up in the northern hemisphere, when you go down to the south, when does the compass flip over and does the south start dominating? And from the people I've talked to, they said it never does. North always has priority, which is interesting.
We're told that our planet has a liquid metal center, which is sloshing around, which is why the magnetic North Pole is constantly moving. But that's their science, but it's not science. It's scientism. It's a belief, because in science you should be able to observe, test, and repeat something. And no one has ever made a liquid magnet that produces a north or south pole. Hasn't been done. The deepest hole that's ever been dug in the Earth, whether it's flat or round, is by the Russians, and it's only 8 miles, which is nothing.
Yeah, and that's a great point. If, for example, if the deepest hole is only 8 miles, and supposedly mainstream science says if you dig right now, it takes you 4,000 miles to get to the center, and another 4,000 to come out the other side, but the deepest hole ever drilled is 8 miles, then when you open your textbooks, and these textbooks have been around for decades, and they show those bands of red and orange and yellow and white, and they're all evenly spaced apart like every 1,000 miles, how are you getting that exactly? You haven't dug down even a tenth of 1% down there, but yet the science doesn't put disclaimers. They will not put a textbook out with the Earth with a big question mark in the center, because, like David said, it's a belief.
Jeremy, as you mentioned ball Earth from here forward, you have to add the word theory past it until you show us anything that proves that we live on a ball Earth. And I can guarantee you there's nothing.
Yeah.
All right. If you're not satisfied with that response, let us know, John, and we'll make sure that we follow up with the guys. Mark, you outline a series of clues, in fact, 12 of them in your book, which we have linked up. Folks can check that out by clicking the link at parabnormalradio.com. Flat Earth clues, the sky's the limit. Let's pull one out of the hat right now.
Pull one out of the hat. How about clue 2, which would be the Byrd wall? That seemed to be the one that really got a lot of people's attention, and that focused on an admiral of the United States Navy named Richard E. Byrd, who was, in my opinion, at least the United States' greatest explorer of all time. He was the youngest admiral of the United States Navy at age 41, and first guy to supposedly fly to the North Pole in a rickety plane in 1926. And most of the people would go, why does that name sound familiar? Because he is linked to hollow Earth theory. And that's how I kind of got into this. I was looking into hollow Earth theory, and I found out that after that 1926 mission to the North Pole, he focused all his attention to the South Pole. Whoever his handlers were, his controllers, they had him flying from 1928 until just before his death in 1957. He spent the rest of his life down in Antarctica, better part of 30 years looking for something, and wasn't finding it, whatever it was. And I had no doubt that he was looking for the outer marker, the boundary of our world. And for 30 years, I could not find it. In 1954, he goes on television, and pretty much everybody was down there at that point, the Russians, Great Britain, Argentina, Chile, New Zealand. And they were going to carve this thing up, and because it was resource heavy. There was oil, there were minerals, there was coal, a whole mountain range made out of coal. And then he goes down for one last mission in 1955, 1956, called Operation Deep Freeze. And at that point, the world changed. And I know we're not going to be able to get it too much into this show, but just look and see what happened with the powers that be, the moves they made after 1955, 1956. The atomic weapons testing program for the United States and the Soviet Union, firing straight up for 4 years straight, just firing atomic weapons, big yields, not the kiloton range, high kiloton to low megaton. But what was really interesting was that after that Operation Deep Freeze, everybody got off the ice in a big hurry, and they started putting together what's now known as the Antarctic Treaty, the most rock-solid treaty, longest-lasting, impenetrable treaty that's ever been put out there. And what it says is, if your country becomes an economic power, this will be put in front of you, and you have to sign it. And what it says is, Coriolis effect?
EOTVOS, the change in perceived gravitational force caused by the change in centrifugal acceleration resulting from eastbound or westbound velocity, and particularly the question was that how does that play into flat Earth? Does it have any effect?
I you know what? I have no proof that it even exists.
I've been doing this for a couple of years now, and I've never heard that term ever used by anyone. Interesting.
Right.
Sorry,
Okay.
I can't even
Don't know
address
that one.
it.
Sorry.
Although, look, let's throw gravity in there since he's going to bring it up. Gravity is an interesting thing because a lot of people will bring up not that effect, but they'll mention gravity. And Neil deGrasse Tyson on several interviews, he's not shy of saying, he's like, look, mainstream science can't tell you what gravity is. They can only tell you what it does. They can only tell you its effects because there's no way to test. No one's ever run a test of gravity, an official, a full-blown the elevation starts climbing very, very quickly, and most of it's a plateau at least what's reported to us, at 14,000 feet or higher. And altitude sickness kicks in at 7,000 feet or give or take. And then it goes up to 20,000 feet in some places with no indigenous animal life, no plant life, no ancient ruins, as far as we know. The place just screams naturally, go away. Again, which is why you got to ask yourself, why? So why are they protecting it so hard? Why is the Antarctic Treaty even there? And why? Let me throw one more thing. If I'm the head of Exxon, meaning we all know that the oil companies have the backstage pass to just about anywhere. I can start fracking in your backyard tomorrow. But not only can I not set up shop in Antarctica, I'm not even allowed to talk about it. If I had friends at the New York Times, I'd run a full-page ad every month saying how great it would be for Mark and his Exxon company to go to Antarctica. I'm not even allowed to do that. It's one of those unwritten things that's out there. It's like you're not only not allowed to go there, you aren't even allowed to debate it. And you'd think, not just America, China, why wouldn't they go for it? They need resources. Russia, trying to rebuild after World War II. UK, same deal. No, the countries that are close, Argentina, Chile, New Zealand, Australia, none of these countries. Anyway, I can go on. What else?
You could, if you wish. Mark, how does your hollow Earth theory conflict with this enclosed world model?
Hardly at all. As a matter of fact, when I got into this, because I had gotten into flat Earth because I was looking at every other conspiracy, and I just got bored with other conspiracies. I thought I knew pretty much all of them inside and out. And when I was looking at hollow Earth theory, I thought, okay, is this killing it? No, it's not. In fact, most conspiracies do not conflict. In fact, they dovetail pretty well. I mean, yeah, you'll have to re-examine just about every conspiracy you can think of, at least the big ones, when it comes to the flat Earth. But hollow Earth, you don't need much. You don't need. The hollow Earth says that it's a globe and the whole thing is hollowed out and it's this giant cavernous area and it turns into just like a journey to the center of the Earth type thing. But people forget how little altitude we need to survive. 95% of our civilization, it goes from sea level to about 5,000 feet. That's about 1 mile. That's not very high at all. So you could still have a big cavernous area underneath this thing, and even if it was 100 miles high, that's more than enough for most civilizations, including ours, which leads back into kind of a circular thing where it's like, who's to say that we aren't? This structure isn't inside a much bigger structure. Could we be underwater? Are we a snow globe that's in a cave? We don't know. We could be on. This could be God's footstool for all we know.
818-672-6865. That's 818-672-6865. My guest, David Weiss, Mark Sargent, enclosedworld.com. Admiral Byrd. Tell us about him, Mark.
Well, Admiral Byrd, again, interesting guy. And he was, no doubt, the most... We talked about it a little bit earlier, but I want to go into something a little different with him, which was he flew all those missions. Remember, he flew his own planes on top of being, an admiral in the United States Navy. But his last mission, which was in 1955, 1956, if you guys want to look up a really neat thing on him, and we were lucky to get this footage, go on YouTube and type in Admiral Byrd, B-Y-R-D, the Longines chronoscope, and that's spelled Longines, I believe, chronoscope interview. And that's a CBS affiliate put it out there where he was interviewed. It was like a 60 minutes of the day back in 1954. And they were asking him all sorts of questions. And he came out and said that it was interesting, again, this was before Operation Deep Freeze, that there was a landmass down there, at least as big or bigger than the United States, which no human had ever seen with their eyes. And he was basically saying, look, if I haven't seen it, nobody's seen it. And they were asking, that's when he disclosed on camera that there was a mountain range made out of coal, and there was uranium, there was oil deposits, and he was worried that there was going to be conflicts down there and that people were going to carve this thing up, and yet nobody laid claim to it. And so what was interesting was after Operation Deep Freeze in 1955, 1956, he died in 1957. A heart attack supposedly at home. And when you look at the guy, he was, I could tell, a picture of health, career military man, lifelong explorer in cold weather environments. This guy was hardy. So did they get to him? Did they say, well, he seems to be a little too candid when it comes to being on camera. We don't want to blow this thing. Yeah, maybe. It was either that or he died because he figured, he reached the ultimate explorer's goal, which was he saw literally the end of the world, and he didn't, where do you go from there? But he was looking for it for 30 years. And again, fascinating guy. And I recommend anybody just to, don't even have to watch my footage. Just look up the YouTube footage on Admiral Byrd. It's great. Black and white, but it's still very, very good.
Hey, David, are you disappointed that we're not hearing from more round earthers tonight? I for months have really actually been trying to find somebody, a PhD, a scientist, a researcher, somebody from academia, anybody.
You're not going to get one because there are people in academia that do know and are the keepers of the secret, and I don't know how big that number is, but anyone else that is an astrophysicist that has no idea that the Earth is flat is completely indoctrinated, and their inner being will not allow them to look there because it will negate their entire life's work, and they'll lose their job and they'll be homeless, and they know that if they come out. Anybody that will, we've done many debates. Mark's done a ton. I've done a bunch. And one of two things that happens is the person is like, oh my God, this is so ridiculous. I don't need to prepare. And then they show up, and if they are able to listen, they really have their minds blown. Most of them are not able to listen, and they just throw out question after question and don't listen to any answers. Yeah. That happens. The other option is the person really digs in to know what to know their arguments, and then they bail out and they don't do the show because they realize there's absolutely no proof whatsoever for a spinning ball flying through space.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mark.
Oh, I was going to say the Stanton Friedman thing was a perfect example of that. We were so desperate to get somebody that they grabbed Stanton Friedman, and he walked his way into it. And I was talking to him, and I'm like 10 minutes, and you talked to him too later. And I'm like 10 minutes in, and he stops me. He goes, whoa. We're talking about this like it's a real thing. It's not like a metaphor for something else. It's like a literal flat earth. And I'm going, yes. He's going, and then he pauses. He goes, well, how does that work? It's like, oh man. So I had to, then it turned into a tutorial, which was awful.
Here's another thing. Anyone out there that's listening that's scratching their head, if you believe that the Earth is flat and this is the first time you're hearing it, you are a fool. You should not believe it. You need to look into it yourself with the purpose of proving it wrong. Yeah. You have to look into it, and there's an answer for every single question out there. Yeah. Here. Most ball earthers, which is the people that follow the mainstream narrative, what we've been taught our whole life, believe this. I'll sum it up really quick: that the Earth is spinning at over 1,000 miles per hour at the equator. Well, that's faster than the speed of sound. That's kind of weird right there. While it's spinning, it's spiraling around the sun at 66,000 miles per hour. That's like 100 times the speed of sound. While it's spiraling around the sun, it's also chasing the sun between 500 and 700,000 miles per hour. And those are only some of the motions. And then you believe that every single day of every year that the stars reset into their exact position that they were the previous year, the previous decade, the previous millennium, that we're looking at the exact same star constellations that the Egyptians looked at. And where the Earth is moving billions of miles a year. It's utter nonsense, and it's scientism.
Yeah, there's no parallax scrolling at all. What he's talking about there. If people look at that up, parallax scrolling. Why? What David said. Why are we seeing the same constellations, not just from year to year, but millennia to millennia? They've never changed. And one more I want to throw in, the why science is having such a hard time with this, is because they only have so many tools in the toolbox. We've got a really big toolbox to throw at them, but you don't want to be the scientist that comes up against us in a fight and even makes it to a draw, because it's I'll use the boxer reference. Science should have so much power, so much information on their side that they should knock us out in the middle of the first round. Straight up. That's what should happen. If that does not happen, which it hasn't yet, you don't want to be that guy caught in the ring when people on the outside is like, why haven't you knocked him out yet? Well, it's the third round. Why is this guy still standing? It just gets worse and worse, and it's going to come right now. We're fighting to draws every time, although we have way more conviction than they do. They have a hard time. They don't know what to do with some of our questions. Yeah, they can answer maybe 3, 4, 5 depending, but there's a whole slew of other questions. They have no idea how to address it. They've
Jeremy,
only got so many. Go ahead.
Sorry, Mark. Can I address a question in the chat?
Please do.
So if you Google flat Earth and you come up across one of the debunking videos, the top 10 reasons the Earth can't be flat, one of the straw man arguments is that if you travel on a ball Earth, travel 10,000 miles and turn 90 degrees, and travel 10,000 miles and turn 90 degrees, you end up back where you started from. Yeah, that's true. Only if you start and go exactly 1/4 of the way around the world, turn 90 degrees, go 10,000 miles and turn 90 degrees. Yeah, that works if you're on a ball, but guess what? We're not on a ball, and it doesn't work.
Yeah. Plus, if you're going to try to do that in reality, you're going to have to use the GPS system, and the GPS system has been compromised since day one. GPS, which stands for Global Positioning System, that's a DoD, United States Department of Defense program that really was just the old LORAN, LORAN system, which was a ground-based radar system, which they slapped on a new sticker on it and said, oh, we've got satellites. That's all they ever did. And you're thinking, oh, no, there's satellites. There's 30-something satellites that are floating around the GPS system. There's blanket coverage. And I go, yeah? Then find me a plane tracking software when the plane goes offshore 150, 200 miles. And all of a sudden it blinks out, and the latitude and longitude change from numbers to something called estimated or approximate.
Yeah, for those listeners out there that think that's, if there's 10, 20, 30,000 satellites spinning around the Earth, there should be satellite coverage everywhere. But as soon as you get where there's no land mass within 100 to 200 miles, you lose satellite coverage, which makes absolutely no sense. Satellites are land masts that are linking all around the world, and they only work where there are masts, and that's where there's land or shallow water, and they built one in the water. There's so many proofs on the Earth, but everybody likes to look into space and say, hey, what about the eclipses? What about the moon phases? And we have most of the answers for that. In the chat, people are asking about moon phases real quick. Just the other night, there was a crescent moon that you can see hours after sunset. Impossible on the heliocentric model. That should only be visible during the day. There's full moons, which means that the sun should be 180 degrees on the other side of the Earth, that are the full moons visible during the day. There's pictures of it. Many people have seen it. Impossible on the heliocentric model.
Yeah, and my arguments are slightly different because I will still lean on the planetarium model, the Truman Show thing, and that is if you go to the Hayden Planetarium, which is run by Neil deGrasse Tyson right now, and you look up there, get your eyes adjusted, they will show a waxing and waning crescent, blood moon, comets, the whole 9 yards. Are they, and you can look at them with binoculars, they look pretty real, but they're not real because you're in a planetarium. When you walk outside of it, once you're done, who's to say you're not in a much, much bigger one? How do you know? And eventually, sooner or later, you're going to have to come back on NASA, which was, and how much time we got before the break?
We got about 5 minutes.
Okay, I can do this way quicker than that. When you want to lean on NASA, which all of us do at some point, everybody, the T-shirt, which David, I'm sure will get printed up eventually, which is, I became a flat earther because I tried to debunk flat Earth. Everybody leans on NASA, and they say, "Oh well, NASA's got all this great footage." And I'm going, "Yeah, they've got a few things, but they should have so much more." In fact, there's a lot of things that are noticeably missing. For example, all the missions, Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, Soyuz, take your pick. There is no running camera footage of any astronaut in an exterior shot turning the camera around 180 degrees or further. It doesn't exist. There is no running camera shot of anything that leaves a launch pad and leaves Earth orbit and comes back, or any way. There is no footage of any astronaut in an airlock just opening the door and walking outside, with a GoPro camera running. There's so many little things that should be the Earth rotating on its axis. Up until 2015, summer of 2015, that didn't even exist. You can, in fact, even today, 2017, right now, you can only get one of two things. You can get the Earth rotating on its axis with the weather not morphing, which is impossible over a 24-hour period, or you can see the weather morphing, but the Earth doesn't rotate. I don't know why you can't get both. But the point was that none of those things even happened until
you can't get both because it's utter nonsense. It's really bad CGI. There's actually a YouTuber, spacing on his name right now, who does models of the Earth and space way better than NASA, and he does it on a $0 budget. It's amazing. Hey, one more thing about the eclipses. Think about this: the eclipse of the moon is supposedly when the Earth comes in between the sun and the moon and shines a shadow on the moon. Well, there's been many documented eclipses, one on television not too long ago, where the reporter could see the moon and the sun above the horizon. Okay, so that eliminates the Earth as being the reason for that shadow, if that's what it is. And then when the eclipse did happen, the shadow or the darkening of the moon came in from the top down, which is impossible. If it was the Earth, it would come in from the bottom up, and it's impossible to have happened if the Earth if the moon and the sun are above the horizon from the observer's point of view. So something else is going on there. There's a lot of different theories out there, and we don't know what it is. But one thing that we do know is that it is impossible for the Earth to be causing that shadow.
Mark, did the Bible speak of...
Oh, good Lord. Yeah. In fact, there's some fantastic websites out there. I know we're running out of time before the break. The best website for that is testingtheglobe.com by Rob Skiba. I don't even want to, I'm not that great at quoting chapter and verse, but one I'd like to point out, which has really raised an eyebrow for me, was Wernher von Braun, the father of NASA, the father of rocket scientism, call that. Wernher von Braun, on his headstone, it has the year he was born, the year he died, and Psalm 19:1. It just says Psalm 19:1. I had to look it up. I didn't know. And it says, and the firmament shows his handiwork. Why is the father of rocket science talking about a dome-like structure that covers us? why is he reaching out from the grave to tell us something? Genesis, the firmament that separates the waters above from the waters below. So many quotes that say the earth is immovable, sits still, the earth is fixed, and so on and so on. And I know some people will say, he who sits upon the circle of the earth. Circle is not globe, it is not ball, it is not sphere. Circle is round. But that does not, a dinner table can be a circle. That doesn't mean it's a ball.
Speak now or forever hold your peace. When we come back, final thoughts, theories, evidence on Flat Earth with Mark Sargent and David Weiss. I'm Jeremy Scott. David wanted to address a question from the chat room about the planets.
Yeah, so the argument is, hey, I look through a telescope, I see all the other planets are spinning balls. You actually don't. What we see is lights in the sky. I've looked through high-powered observatory telescopes, and when I look at Saturn, it sure does look like a sphere to me. It may very well be a sphere, but it's not a giant rock in space. The planets are called wandering stars. They are the same as stars, but they just move on their own. The stars are fixed in position and rotate around the center point that we call Polaris. And I'm not sure what the planets are. That's a much longer conversation, but they are just lights in the sky. They're not giant rocks, floating above us like Disney and NASA tell us. So that's my comment there.
Unless Mark has a rebuttal or a
no. What he said was perfect. What we do is we make the leap because we see the NASA pictures. He said, well, I've seen the close-up. Because you look up in the sky. Yeah, you look in the telescope, you see some blurry, fuzzy light thing. But then you remember, NASA's got these razor-sharp images of Saturn's rings and Jupiter's moons and so forth. But you've never seen them that way.
Yeah, so
again, you're...
Sorry, Mark. When NASA and Disney show us pictures of planets, like the recent picture of Pluto, they're utter ridiculousness. I could take a picture of the bottom of a frying pan. It looks more like a planet than what they're showing us. But when you actually look through a P900 or a good telescope, you see an energetic, moving, non-physical thing, and the fact that you're able to zoom in on it and focus in on it tells you that it's not these ridiculous distances away. We're told that the sun is 400 times larger than the moon and 400 times farther away. Okay, so it takes 8 minutes for the light of the sun to get here. They tell us. So this gigantic sun becomes the size that we see it at 8 light minutes away. Let's double that distance. It should be a pin dot in the sky at just 15 light minutes. Let's 8 times that. That's a light hour away. It would be impossible to see. And we're told that we can see stars that are hundreds of light years away, thousands of light years, and we're talking about a light hour. Doesn't make any sense when you actually look at it.
Do you guys believe in stars and planets?
Not in the way that they tell us. They are just anyone that says anything more than they are a light in the sky is making up conjecture. They have no idea. The stars, the sun, and the planets are very, very close to Earth.
Yeah, and the parallax scrolling, I think, still fits into this again, which is people don't understand what I mean when I say that. If the closest star is 4 light years away, which is an impossible distance anyway, and some of those stars are millions of light years away, then the one that's closer should be traveling through the sky at a faster rate. But yet, when you see the time-lapse footage, it's always the same. The stars always move in the same path. That there's nothing goes out of sequence. It's always this wonderful clockwork motion. And that shouldn't be possible. So what David says is absolutely right. Yeah, there's something up there, sure, but I'll throw a biblical thing in there, which is God made the sun and the moon, but it was NASA that told us how big they were and how far they were away.
Mm-hmm. David, you also wanted to address the Coriolis effect.
So real quick, for people that don't know what the Coriolis effect is, it's that water drains down drains in different directions. We're told that sinks and bathtubs and toilets spin opposite in the southern hemisphere in Australia, for example. That is untrue. It all depends on how the water enters the basin to go down the drain. You can have sinks in the same house that will spin in different directions, or even the same sink spin in different directions depending on how the water is put into it. You cannot produce this opposite spinning of air or water on a ball. It's not observable or repeatable or testable and repeatable. However, everybody believes that, to the south of the equator, storms spin one way, which they do, and to the north of the equator, they spin another, which they do most of the time. Spinning an object does not create this, but putting a paddle through a body of water or air with smoke in it, you can see you'll get vortices spinning in opposite directions. Everybody's done it. Just fill up a tub with water, put your hand in it, or get a wooden spoon or a paddle, and just push it through the water, and you will see opposite spinning vortices. And so what is causing that? Well, the moon and the sun orbit above the flat Earth, in between, the center section, in between the Tropic of Capricorn and the Tropic of Cancer, just basically the center part of that disk. And they are electric and magnetic in nature, for lack of a better word. And that electromagnetic force is what's pushing. It's the wake of the sun and the moon that cause the spinning effect of the atmosphere.
And yeah, and if anyone thinks there is a Coriolis effect happening, especially with the drains, I encourage you to watch a video, and he's not a flat earther, by a giant YouTube channel called Smarter Every Day. And this guy is about as legit as you can get. I mean, he's what Mythbusters should have always been. And he did a simultaneous test, with identical equipment. I mean, this is as good as any university could have done, with a kids' wading pool, specially built, one in the northern hemisphere, one in the southern hemisphere, and with a central drain, and just to make sure that water was absolutely perfectly still, that instead of even putting little boats on top of the water, they used eyedroppers full of color dye, and then they pulled the plug simultaneously while they had each other, on video phones. And he basically determined, it's like, look, I don't know, it's a myth. The spin was so gradual that it was almost undetectable. That on a smaller scale, for like a toilet or a sink, it all came down to the direction of where the water was going into the basin. So whatever the tourist traps are doing at the equator, it's all a shell game. It's not there. It doesn't happen. But another thing about the Coriolis effect, and which is a little different, but we hear about this from time to time, is the military, because mainstream news will say that, if a sniper rifle takes a long enough shot, they have to take into account the spin of the Earth, the Coriolis effect. And if you shoot, look, I've shot for years, and scopes only have two things on them: windage and elevation. If the Coriolis effect actually affected sniper rifles, you would have a compass on that thing. And you would have to know not only where you were, what direction you were shooting, like northwest, southeast, it would have to be in degrees, but you'd also have to know what part of the globe you were on, because remember, it spins at 1,000 miles an hour at the equator, but it's a different spin depending on how close you are to the poles, if you believe that. And so the sniper, and I've talked to a sniper instructor for the Marines, 3 years. He goes, it's not even in the manual. I've spoken with artillery guys, tank guys that are shooting 30 miles, 30 times what a sniper shoots. Torpedo guys from submarines, a Navy missile instructor who shot missiles at 50 miles plus. That's the unclassified version. He goes, and all these people, every single one of them said the same thing, and they said, yeah, we've heard about the Coriolis effect, but we don't apply it in our 9-to-5 jobs. It's not there. It does not. We do not take into account in the firing solutions. There is no spinning of the Earth at all. We treat it like it's a flat plane.
All right, we've got only a couple of minutes left of the program here on this Saturday night with Mark Sargent, David Weiss, and ClosedWorld.com. 818-672-6865, 818-672-6865. Mark's got a YouTube channel, but you guys also recommend some others.
David.
Oh yes, sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, for those people that are really want to find out the truth, and go into it just looking for the truth, not with an expectation. There's a couple great channels. There's a show that's on live every Sunday afternoon, which is tomorrow, called Globebusters. I'm kind of the creator of Globebusters. There's a great channel called Jeranism, who puts out amazing videos. I might say I'm the brains behind Jeranism. There's another show that's on multiple times per week called Flat Earth and Other Hot Potatoes. Mark's on that a lot, where they interview a lot of flat earthers. I would call myself a special consultant to that. And then another one of my favorite channels is ODD Reality, and I would say that I'm a mentor to ODD.
Yeah.
And Mark, you have a podcast as well?
Yeah. I've got a podcast on Truth Frequency Radio called Strange World. And again, for anyone who's listening tonight, just remember, don't take our word for it. Do your own research and ask questions. We're not going to convince you in the short term of this program. It's all we're doing is planting a seed in your head. You're going to have to go and convince the globe for yourself. But if you want to keep the world the way it is, don't do it. Don't look at it, because it is Pandora's box. Once you lift that lid open, there's nothing you can do. That genie is out.
Is there some infighting among you flat earthers out there?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, the people have different opinions, and by the way, I am not any of those things I said. Those are just great channels, and I wish I was all of what I said.
Yeah, shameless plug. You're okay, so I wouldn't mind either way.
It wasn't me. There's people that absolutely hate Mark because he thinks that we live in an enclosed world. Well, I'm with Mark that I think there is some enclosedness to it. I just don't think we understand what it is. Yeah. There's all sorts of stuff, but I've seen lately flat earthers really coming together and putting any differences on what we speculate, what we can't prove, and focusing on what we all know, that the Earth is not a spinning ball and we live on a flat, motionless plane.
Yeah, because of the big thing that changed this year. Yeah, there was infighting last year, but the conference this year down in Raleigh, North Carolina in November, we're going to hit critical mass at that point. It's going to be fantastic. So just about everybody he mentioned there is going to be at the Flat Earth International Conference, and you guys can check that out. Go to fe2017.com.
Address the question about the sun in Antarctica from Calvin, please, David.
So quickly, as the sun rotates around the Earth, the farther away it is from you is when it sets. And when it's in the tight circle around the Arctic, which is the Tropic of Cancer, it's never too far away from places in Alaska. So to speak, at where you will see the sun go all the way around, it'll never set because it's making a tight circle. Why it's doing that in our summer, it's pitch black in Antarctica because the sun never gets close enough. As the sun starts going out past the equator to the outer southern hemiplane, there is not a 24-hour sun in Antarctica. So people believe that there's a 24-hour sun, which negates the flat Earth model, but there is no proof of a 24-hour sun. There's 4 videos that are all been proven fake. And there is, darkness in Antarctica, which makes sense on the flat Earth model, but there is not a 24-hour sun in Antarctica.
Yeah, it's good. Good point. And look, if he's going to go down the road, I still think the bigger question is, if you're going to ask that, you should say, hey, why we can't find any good footage of what's down in Antarctica? Because corporations aren't allowed to go down there. Explain that, globalist people listening.
Also, in Antarctica's summer, when the sun is making its biggest loop around, because of the way, the sun isn't what lights up the Earth. It's the sun lights up the sky. There's actually video of a lightning strike in the middle of the night that turned the entire sky blue. So the sun fluoresces the sky. It's an electrical exchange, and that's what gives us our light. So in the December 21st, which is the farthest circle, the widest circle that the sun makes, there is a lot of light in Antarctica. It's light. It might be light for 20 hours. for several reasons, but the sun is not visible that entire time. The light in the sky. If you think about it, let's say the sun just comes up on one side of your house. You can go out on the other side of your house and read the newspaper, and that sunlight isn't getting there. And that's because the sun is literally fluorescing the sky like a Tesla coil would fluoresce a bunch of LED bulbs. And as